Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning in our City Council Budget Development meeting. We'll go ahead and get started. Ruth, could you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Adamson? Here. Gray?
Here.
Gina?
Here.
Johnston? Lurick? Here. Black?
Here. Thank you. We'll go ahead and get started with agenda item number 2. Is a fiscal year 2019 budget development items, and Joyce Strohshiner, Chief Financial Officer, and staff will be. I'm not going to read all your names out.
I'll let everybody say their
There
name.
you go.
So.
We'll turn the time over to you, Joyce.
Okay, thank you. So today we're going to start our first budget development meeting, and I'm Joyce Strohshiner, Chief Financial Officer for the city, and with me I have
Ashley Walsh, Senior Accountant.
Lynette Sampson, HR Consultant, Compensation.
Heather Buchanan, HR Director.
Okay. So what we're going to discuss today is we have the reserve review completed, and so we'll take a look at that. Mainly, the purpose of this is to see if we have any funds that are not at their reserve requirement, and to also determine if we have funds that have excess reserves that can assist us with capital purchases for those departments. Interfund fuel rates, we'll discuss that. The rate study and implementing that in our budget development as we discuss every year. Property tax, give you some of the information on, we don't know anything about new construction yet, but we will discuss what our 3% levy amount is available to us. And our one-time capital contingency monies and new personnel requests and compensation overall. That's what we'll be discussing today. So before we go into the slides, I have handed out to you the reserve review, and I'm just going to kind of quickly go over it and kind of summarize the situation with all the funds. I don't want to go into a lot of detail because it's a lot of detail on this spreadsheet, as you can see. But basically what this spreadsheet does is it lists what our 2018 expenditures are for each fund, the 25% reserve requirement by our policy. If a fund has capital requirements, capital reserve requirements, that's listed. And so then I get to a total reserve requirement. Then I take a look and see what are their reserves as of the end of fiscal year 17 that's available for 18, and if there's an excess. And then if they had any planned use of reserves in their budget or through an amendment at this point. So in the general fund, I think this is a pretty big success story. We are just short of our reserve requirement by $152,123, which means we went from 80% last year to 98% of our requirement this year. So that's really good, and it also indicates that probably by the time we wrap up fiscal year 18, we will be there. Okay. Street fund, $847,000, and I'm just going to kind of do these in rounded numbers, okay? $847,000 in excess. And I'll note there, the Federal Aid Construction Fund, 70, that's where the debt for the South Valley is being paid back to. I wanted you to note that the debt on that remaining as of this point is $1,250,000. We have 5 more payments to make. We've made our payment for fiscal year 18, and so in the next 5 years we should have that debt completely removed. But those monies come from the street fund to pay it back.
And how much are we paying each year?
$250,000. Street special projects, you'll see $450,002 in excess reserves. That's not really excess in the sense that it's budgeted for fiscal year 18. That was our $450,000 payment for the ITD interchange construction project. Recreation fund, this is another big success story. They're at a minus $169,383. They are at 74% of their reserve requirement, which is up from 53% in the prior year. So they're doing very well. One comment I would probably make, and something to take into consideration, because the likelihood that we will end 18 with excess reserves in the general fund is pretty likely. It may be the best solution at that point to take care of this fund and clean up its reserve requirement. It had to absorb zoo 2 years ago, and we never sent reserves with it, and so that might be a way to kind of facilitate making us healthy in all these funds, okay? Just something to keep in mind, no commitment to it at this point. Cemetery, they're in excess of $109,184 because they have a planned expenditure this year of $35,000 for their flatbed truck, which is already executed. Airport fund, $99,882. They had $2,000 remaining on their terminal roof repair that occurred in fiscal year 18, and so that's the reserves they were using. Library fund, $263,930. Video services, $130,000. Cheap Theater Fund, remember this fund is just a drawdown of reserves for the arts, and so they have $76,213 left as of the first of the year. Emergency repair, $180,000. Science and environment, $133,000. Sanitation, and this is, you'll note, this is after the $1.5 million we put aside for the purchase of the new property and remodeling of the property, to $2,180,000. And then you'll see all of the water department funds. There are 5 of them, and they all have excess reserves. I'm not going to name all of those, but it looks like in composition, you're over $4 million. But remember, $1.2 million of that is for water rights only. Water pollution control, they are at approximately 3.8 million in reserves. Liability insurance, $198,000. Information systems, or IT as we call it, $113,000. Utility billing, $264,000. Wellness, $71,000. Public Works Administration, $51,000. Fuel Internal Service Fund, $19,000. And that's with a built-in buffer of $50,000 for capital needs. I know that we're going to have some issues with tanks coming down the road, so we'll be taking a look at that in their budget build this year. Workers' insurance, this is another good story. We're now at only short of that $1.5 million that they wanted in that fund for reserves by $282,000. But remember, and I can't measure that at this point. As of the end of 17, that's what this measurement point is. But for 18, we increased the experience rating by 6%, and so we'll have to take a look and see how that's going to facilitate making the rest of the movement, or if we're going to need to do another 6% move on the rating. Okay. The other thing that we could do is we could also take a look, because liability insurance has excess reserves. We might do another transfer to facilitate some of that. I wouldn't take all their excess down for this, but I would maybe consider moving another amount to it, and we can have more discussion on that. Debt service, $33,000. Airport construction, $193,000. Remember, these are monies that are built up from passenger facility charge to facilitate their airport projects each year. Fire apparatus, this is technically a savings account, $128,000. Building renovation, $88,000. Street equipment capital, $28,000. They have a planned use of reserves of $75,000 for their aerial bucket truck. Capital acquisition, $682,000. What you're seeing in this particular fund is all the movements that we're making to facilitate capital projects at the end of the year, and about $279,000 of this is related to the capital contingency that wasn't spent in 17 that was moved here. Retirement payout, $998,000. Police grants, $39,000. Police retirement, this is that pension plan, and those monies are there for us to pay our retirees. CDR Loan Trust, this is an old grant fund that is no longer active as that grant fund, $94,000. Zoo Animal Education Trust, $88,000. Facade Loan Trust, this is an old grant fund that is no longer an active grant, but these are the residual monies left over from that grant. $72,000, and property abatement, $64,000. So in turning back to the slides, I've listed for you the excess reserves in the tax-supported funds. So we have street, cemetery, airport, library, and video services. And those are there for you to view. If we determine we have needs in those departments for capital purchases, this would be a way to facilitate those purchases. Okay. Then in our other funds, liability insurance, the $198,000, public works, $51,000, environmental science, $133,000, and $64,000 in property abatement for abatement issues and demolition. These are the funds that we just discussed that have need to build the remaining reserves on. And like I said, I'm confident that we are going to surpass the reserve requirement this coming year for the general fund. Recreation fund, it could possibly, because it basically came down by about half of what it was out. And so it could actually do it itself if it has another year like it did last year. Workers' insurance. Then we're going to talk fuel rates. We don't have numbers yet for fiscal year 19, the proposed rates, because our measurement period for this is March 1st through February 28th. And since the 28th was only yesterday, we don't have the rates yet. And so we'll probably present this to you on the, well, we will present this to you on the 8th.
What'd you do last night?
I know. Call me crazy.
From midnight to 5 a.m., you could have done something for this.
Yeah. I'm thinking financial statements right now, that's why. Okay, diesel last year was $2.30 per gallon, and unleaded is $2.60. And so I know that we're getting the report today from the street department, and we'll put those numbers together so you can see those next week. Just a reminder on how we calculate things. What happens is this report we receive from the street department is the usage by department. And so we use those numbers to generate what that interfund charge will end up being for the payment of their fuel. Now, it's not an automatic, we just charge those departments for the projected. It's only based on actual usage. And so that's why we go off those numbers to develop the next year's budget. So if they have increased usage, it's going to show up in that interfund charge. Okay?
Do any departments use fuel except what comes out of this fund? Are there any?
Oh, you mean purchase fuel elsewhere?
Yes.
Yes, they do. Transit has their own fuel fund, or fuel site. So does WPC, and I want to say airport. Is that correct, Tom?
Yep.
And then sometimes if the fuel site isn't open, and I'm not sure on hours, let's say it's the ambulance, they have to go and fuel up because they're around the clock. So, and we told you the measurement period. Finance calculates the average fuel rate for this period and increases this rate by 20%. This is for administration, and it's basically equivalent to the fuel tax, and helps to facilitate the administration from the street fund, and also to put reserves aside for any needs at the fuel site. Departments can make a request for additional interfund fuel expense during their budget presentation. Okay, the rate study. So every 5 years, we've hired an outside consultant to help us build our rate study plan. It's basically a budget plan for 5 years. It tells us what rates to charge to our consumers so that we can meet the maintenance and the capital projects for those specific services, okay? And so basically all the detail here is trying to tell you it takes a while to generate that rate study. And fiscal year 19's build is the last year of our rate study that we have in place right now. So basically this spring, we need to come before you and request to go out for another RFQ or I'll have to leave that to Jeff's side on how we go out for our rate study. Now, we've tended to stay with the same rate study company, and partly there's a reason for that, because when you go to build this, they have to understand our system. So the more understanding they have of our system, it facilitates the process a lot faster, and it does take a considerable amount of time on both the finance and the utility departments to produce this information for them to generate the study. For fiscal year 19, the proposal is sanitation, 3%, water 4% increase in rates, and WPC a 3% increase. And of course, the rate study plan builds in the capital projects that are going to facilitate and use those dollars so that we can complete the projects without completely depleting reserves and ensuring that they're in a healthy place. Now, I mean, we just talked about the reserve requirements, and we noted that they do have excess reserves. The great thing about that is when you go to the rate study, if the reserves are very healthy, the rates aren't going to go up by very much because you've already got the required reserves that you need to facilitate your next 5 years. And so you'll see it in reduced rates through that rate study. So the best plan is to follow the plan and allow the next rate study to determine your path and how those excess reserves are going to be utilized, okay? It could allow us to do more projects than what we initially had thought we could do without raising the rates, or raising them very small incrementally. What you don't want to get into the habit of is if you play around with these rates, then all of a sudden you have a huge rate increase, and then people get very upset. It's better to manage this incrementally as it should be than to give a big break and then have a big hit. And that would be my comment about rate studies. The reason why I bring it up here is both to remind you that we're going to need a new rate study, and to get your permission that we will just follow our rate study plan and the development of those utility funds. They'll still present to you what they've put into the budget, what changes they've made based on the rate study and the rate increases, but it is just to follow the plan. Okay.
Does that plan have achievement markers? In other words, each one of them we can say, with what we put in last year, we were achieved this level, and can we see if we've achieved that level?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
In other words, we should have generated $9 million out of WPC or something.
Right, it projects what the revenue flow is going to be, but of course, you know, I'm going to use water because I think water is an easy one. If you have a hot summer, you could exceed it, or if you have a very cold summer, you could be under it. It's very easy to see, like with sanitation, because you're not, your environment isn't playing as much a role in that one, and with WPC. But yes, it does project all those things out. It's basically a budget plan. That's what it is. That's what the rate study does.
But I'm saying we can see how we're performing against the study, can't we?
Sure. I don't know that we have per se gone through and done a complete analysis, but a budget, we do budget to actual based on the budget we adopt, which is basically their plan. So in essence, your budget to actual financial statements tell you that, okay? But I haven't taken like the rate study and taken our actuals and done a comparison there, okay? So this is just going into more detail that will be coming back before you. In order to be ready with a rate study for 2020, we basically have to go out this spring for the proposal to obtain our company or our consultant, so that we can produce the numbers, generate everything in the fall, by the fall, so that by the spring we have a rate study that's adopted so that we can use that for budget build.
So in essence, we'll be paying for the rate study in this budget year?
Yes, you will. Or the 3 departments that are benefited from the rate study. Okay, property tax, and we went over this a little bit with our training session. This is the highest non-exempt property tax for the past 3 years, and so Oh, I'm sorry. It's just this is the highest one. So you have the highest at $349,836, plus your property tax replacement dollars, that's your ag, and that is your personal property tax, to get to the amount that we multiply by 3% to determine the amount of additional property tax we're allowed to take for the coming year.
Do that
which is-
property tax replacement dollar thing again, Joyce.
Oh, explain it? Okay, it's ag, it's an ag exempt, and we get, I think it's $1,884 from that. It's nothing to,
It's a big one.
it's a big one. And then the personal property, when they went to a higher exemption, they wanted to keep cities and counties at a no-harm state, and so they gave replacement dollars. And that, for us, it's about $351,000.
Where does that come from?
It is, I believe it flows through from the state to the county. We get it through the county, but it's a pass-through to them. And then we levy for the rest. So $861,097 is what we're allowed to levy for. Our foregone tax is at $1,840,882. This is an increase of $49,199 from the prior year. So we didn't utilize everything last year, even though our basic intent was to take the 3%, but because market valuation was much higher, we didn't take it, really. We didn't take all of it as we had thought. Okay, this is the levy limitation reminder. When you're looking at this is kind of a static point. It's not saying that market valuation is going to be flat, but when you're looking at it from a viewpoint of what was market valuation. So this is what our market valuation was at the end of, in computing our fiscal year 18. Okay, so we were at $2,512,851,428 for market valuation that was taxable. In the general fund, we're limited to 0.009. So this is the second. When you think of limitations for property tax, this is you have the overarching 3%, and then you have this secondary level, which gets down into where you levy your tax for. And so general fund has only the ability to levy $909,926 more in property tax before it hits that limitation, and you can't take. Even if I wanted to take all my foregone, I can't take it here. I can only take $909,000. So just something to keep in mind as you're looking at requests and the things that you have to pay for. Now that we know that there'll be market valuation increase, but it's just something to keep on the radar. And we'll go over that. New construction, I'll remind you what we received last year. Liability insurance, it has no limits. You can take as much as you want. The same with the street fund and the animal shelter bond, or any bonded debt, is no limit. Recreation fund is 0.006, and they have remaining amount of $272,589. Cemetery fund, 0.004%. And it has $817,802. Airport fund, 0.006, and it has available $655,700. Library fund, 0.001. Available amount, $859,789. So you can kind of tell when the state determined the statutory limits, you can tell which things they considered more important than others, I think, based on these rates.
Evidently dying is one of them.
Cemetery.
The static market valuations, as of what date?
This one it's for our fiscal year 18 taxing. So when we went through, I say it by that because you really don't have final numbers until after October, November. So these numbers were sent to me in October, but remember when we went through the training on the property tax, your utilities are assessed by the state, and they're not completed till October, sometimes November. So these are as of October. But that means they assess, they go out, the county goes out and assesses, then it has the public hearing time period, which is about June. So no more assessments have been done in this time period. from that marker, from, I'd say, the tail end of May, okay? Then they have their hearings, then they give us final numbers towards the 1st of August. So these numbers are where they're coming from, even though we don't really receive final numbers until October. Does that make sense? I just
So
don't
that
want you
number
to...
will probably go up.
Well, our expectation is that it will. Now, it could be from new construction, or it could be, remember, the county assesses 1/5 of the total property within the city every year, and so you can get new valuation increases from the assessment of that area for the time period. Last year, it was a big benefit to us, so.
I think if the rate goes beyond 6% increase, then they apply it to everything, not just what they're doing. Because if they have a marker, they got to stay within a certain range. And if they find that the ones they're evaluating are going up more than the 6%, it's applied universally.
Oh, and I know that they have restrictions. They have to justify what they're doing with the state. So if the numbers, just like you're discussing, don't look comparable, then they have other remedies for it.
And that's so that 5 years somebody doesn't have a 30% raise.
Yes, yes.
You know, so.
If your valuations are changing that fast, you know it's not just one area.
Well, and the homeowner's exemption has been going up around the state, so it's likely we're going to see increases now.
Well, they'd have to pass legislation because the legislation says that it's 100,000 and that's it.
Yeah, but I'm saying that I thought it went over it.
No. The last ruling, they used to have it based on, I can't remember the market value index, and then they changed it. I think it was 2 years ago,
Okay.
and they're now at the 100,000 and that's it. So it's not going to go up anymore. It stays static unless they change it legislatively. So. Okay, new construction last year, I don't have numbers. I probably won't have numbers until August 1st. It was at $28,879,927. We projected $20 million in our plan. That's the reason why you're seeing that additional foregone that came through. And that produced for us $320,901 in additional levy or tax dollars without impacting your levy rate, okay? One-time contingency monies. At the first of fiscal year 18, we had $2,031,048 available. Those dollars resided within the general fund, non-departmental fund, the $1,751,106, and then in capital acquisition fund, $279,942. Now, since this time, we have purchased some property. That was $1,003,250, and we know we're going to have some remodel expenses related to that building. The way that building is funded, it's 50% sanitation and 50% street, and so we're going to have probably some additional pull on some dollars for the remodel site for the street portion. Ross Park bathroom, last year you gave permission to spend up to $80,000 on that Ross Park bathroom. They're approximately a little over $60,000 at this point of what they've expended. And so I'm kind of monitoring that. They tried to do as much as they could in 17, but they're over into 18 now to wrap up.
Why did it say $612?
That's what they've expended that has been utilized out of fund, the non-departmental fund. The people time, their people time of doing the work is all covered by the Parks Department. So it's not to say they're not doing anything more than $612, but that's all that's being tapped for, because it was the materials side that was being tapped for the non-departmental or the capital contingency dollars. And so the balance of your capital contingency dollars at this point in time is $1,027,186. Okay. And we'll probably utilize the capital acquisition dollars last, utilize the ones out of non-departmental first, because then that way I don't have to move as much if I have excess at the end of the year. So just so you know my plan of attack on that. Okay, new position requests. We have animal care assistant specialist. It's a full-time position being requested. It's funded through the general fund for a total of $48,628. We have a request, and there's a double star on that one. It says that it's a reclass from a part-time position to a full-time position. So there's some part-time wages that are going against it. So that isn't the total cost. This is just the additional monies that would be needed in order to fund this change, okay?
On top of the part-time expenditure in the
Right.
past?
Because what you're looking at is what is the additional cost to the budget? What's the budgetary impact? That's what we're looking at right now. Probationary firefighters, 3 of them, $231,388.
So, sorry, one thing to note on that is one of those positions we would be requesting to the county to fund for an EMS position. Dave just made sure he submitted all 3 so you understood the whole number.
Okay. And also note on that, there's one asterisk on it. Additional capital costs will be required because their facilities for housing the individuals would have to be addressed. So you have some additional costs above and beyond the $231,388. Planning technician, full-time, general fund, $46,438. A senior planner, full-time, in the general fund, $92,277. The Parks Greenway Trails maintenance, this is part-time, so we're just looking at additional part-time dollars of $11,413. The Parks Code Enforcement Assistant, it's a part-time position within the Parks Department, an additional part-time budget of $5,406. Police stenographer and a support specialist, so this is 2 positions, totaling $126,582. Police third-class officers, 2 of them, $152,659. I put in there could possibly be capital costs related to additional personnel. Of course, in all personnel positions, you're going to have additional operating costs because I can't just hire a person and all the support things that go with them. It's real easy to say with firefighters and police officers, they're going to have uniforms and other items that they're going to need when you hire the personnel. Can they absorb it in their existing budget? When we get into budget presentation, you'll get that information. But this is just to give you an idea of the positions that are being requested. Police dispatch operator, full-time, $68,304 for a total in the general fund of $783,095.
Can I interrupt and ask John
Yeah.
a question?
You bet.
What's a Parks Code Enforcement Assistant?
Since we have John here, I'm going to let him answer that question.
About a year ago, Mayor, we started, the different departments are handling their own code enforcement issues. Well, our park supervisor is also our urban forestry staff member, and he handles all of the kind of the tree code related type of enforcement. And what's happening is it's during kind of the heavy growing season, April, May, June, July, August, he's pulled away from his assigned duties of supervising the park maintenance quite a bit. So we were looking to get him kind of a mid-level part-time assistant to let him kind of keep doing his job and maybe absorb some of those burdens. I think we're spread pretty thin, and we could use a little bit of part-time help to help him with those duties, so he's not pulled away from his assigned job duties quite so much.
So what's that person do?
They would make, if there was a code enforcement complaint that came in, like trees overhanging or sight distance or encroaching on sidewalks or things like that, this person, that's why we assign them at level 4. We need somebody that has customer relation skills to knock on doors and interact with residents in a really respectful, customer service oriented way, And we're looking to get out in front of the problems and not play kind of the paper trail game of mailing notices. We want to make contact with the resident. Hey, we've got this issue. Can you take care of it? How about we take care of it for you and knock out the problem right then and there? So that would be the majority of it. And if we had a resident that wasn't complying and we did have to send out notices and start documenting, they would assist with that as well.
So they work with the police department?
No, they would work with our park supervisor. He would oversee this person and kind of delegate, I need you to go visit this residence or that residence on a daily basis, which will enable him to stay in the parks and oversee his work crews.
So if it came to the point where they needed to give a citation, that person would be working with the police department to get that citation issued. But they would do everything they could before.
Don't those complaints come to the police department? Code enforcement complaints?
If they did, they'd be funneled to us depending on what the responsibility area was.
So you're looking at trees that overhang sidewalks or streets that will hit something or obstruct a stop sign or
Correct.
something like that.
But your hope is to resolve those before the police get
Resolve them
involved.
before we
right?
have to start getting into mailing notices. Yeah.
Rick, how we were talking the other night on the sign code, and we want to get ahead of it so that we actually make some contact instead of sending a letter and then waiting a couple weeks and sending another letter and all of that stuff. We want to have somebody knock on the door and say, hey, this is a problem, before we send the letter. If we can get it knocked out before we have to worry about that, that's better. It's better customer service as far as we believe anyway. It's better customer service that way, and we can probably take care of most of the issues, not all of them.
I agree with the philosophy. It just seems like we have two departments doing the same thing.
Well, we've got all of the departments doing that now. If you're in planning and you have a planning issue, the planning department's taking care of the code enforcement for the ordinances that they are responsible for. Instead of having a couple people do 1,500 cases a year, we've got more people doing 1,500 cases a year, so that we can cut that workload down.
Okay.
So you saw the total amount, just something to kind of keep in the back of your mind. Even if you wanted to do this, I think you'd be very stretched to hire all these positions. You already know what your levy limitation limit is within the general fund. You're going to be challenged here on what's needed. When we were having our training, I did discuss the possibility of some positions could be considered temporary during the increased workload, so you could think of hiring in a temporary status. Other ones, you could also, we could also, instead of saying, oh, we're going to get everybody in at the first of the fiscal year, you could put what I would call an employment contingency dollars aside, so as the demand hits, then you would be able to assign those dollars, because as you remember, general fund can be used to expend monies in any department. These are just possibilities. As you're thinking about it, we're not looking for decisions today. This is just information to you, but to think about as you see the whole picture as it unfolds before you, these are the things you need to be thinking about.
And if we were to decide that some of these are more essential services than we have elsewhere, we could do some restructuring of our departments or whatever to move some personnel or resources, couldn't we?
Well, it depends. I mean, the only hard part about restructuring in that shape, are you saying eliminate positions and then hire other positions? Because skills don't necessarily cross over from one position to the other.
Yeah, we would put an emphasis on necessary services and maybe...
Well, and two, when you talk about growth within an area, there are some positions that are going to be needed before other positions. And so you'd have to decide, is it the cart or the horse? Which one do I need first in order to facilitate the growth? And these are the hard decisions. We aren't going to solve this problem today or overnight, but it's just things to think about.
But that's what we're tasked to do, is to make hard decisions and understand that if we want to do some of this, and we have limitations, we want to do raise, we're committed to do a certain percentage of raise, because of our comp plan. that we
And we'll
developed.
talk about compensation in a minute here, but yes, I mean, there's a lot of parts to the puzzle, and so this is a big request, and so you're going to have to weigh this as to the need and the ability to afford it at a given time.
And along with that, these requests came into HR, and we do an analysis of all these positions, where they fit in our pay scale, and what our recommendation is for the positions requested, and then it goes through finance. We do have those documents. If you want to look, we can provide a summary document of our recommendations, and some of these would possibly shift pay grades and whatnot.
So just things to keep in mind as we start moving through the budget, and these are the requests being made. Okay, in other funds, that was the general fund, we have a groomer operator for our trails. It's part-time dollars, $12,387. Assistant manager, Ross Park. There's a little debate as to whether we've interpreted this position right, so we may come back to you with this number. But right now, it says $48,628. We think it might be too high based on what the actual goal of this request was, so we will come back to you with that corrected, if it is a correction that needs to be done. Lead airport operations specialist, full-time, $58,577. Public Works executive assistant, full-time. It's raising the level of existing dollars that we have within the Public Works department for a higher level admin support position, and so that's what those dollars are for. So a total of about $135,569 for those personnel positions. Okay, compensation. Here's the plan this year on compensation. So pay plan, based on the new hybrid and the police tables, we are planning to move one step on the pay plan tables. Step moves are implemented at fiscal year. So if an employee is in their introductory period and they haven't completed that by the time we roll into fiscal year, they won't receive a step move at that time. They'll wait until the next fiscal year. Okay. Merit versus pay for performance, that we're getting back to that because the one-step move is more of a merit-based approach versus a pay for performance approach. Then, according to our fire and ambulance contract, this includes management, there'll be a 1% increase. When we adopted the hybrid plan, we did not do anything with the part-time pay table, and so we're recommending that we increase that table by 1.5%, which means all your part-time dollars that are budgeted, we're going to have to increase those by 1.5% to accommodate the increase. Then the work comp experience rating. Last year we raised it by 6%, which moved it from 59.6% to the 65.96%. And should we do another movement? We're really not going to know until we get to the next reserve review as to how well that 6% has helped. Last year, this cost us about $60,000 across all funds to do the increase. So it's just something to keep in mind. I know that work comp budget will be making that request again. The goal of trying to get back to 100% of our work comp rating. Just to remind you how that works, because you're probably thinking, what is she talking about? Because it's kind of a weird setup. So each position within the city has a rating code based on the industrial commission, okay? And so I'm clerical, so I have a clerical rating. A police officer has a police officer rating. And so based on your experience rating, which is put into the system, it says how much of that rate times their gross wages am I going to put into the work comp dollar bank to pay for work comp expense. For some reason, I think when we were still with the state insurance fund, it got dropped really low because state insurance fund was trying to keep us before we went self-insured. And so we're just trying to get that built back up to where we think it should be. So anyway, that's the story behind work comp. Probably more than you wanted to know. But this is the plan for compensation. So getting back to the one statement of yes, what we're doing with our current employees, this was the plan for them for the coming year. The good news on Percy is we were supposed to have a rate increase in July of this year. They were doing so well that they postponed that. I don't know if there'll be one planned in the fiscal year 2019, and so we'll have to wait to see what's happening there. But your budget right now has built in an increase for the 3-month period, which was around $66,000 for that 3-month period. If they have just postponed it and they want to put that through in fiscal year 19, we're probably already somewhat prepared for it. The big hit will be when it becomes a full year turn. They do it at the turn of their fiscal year, which is July 1st. So that's why we only get a 3-month hit when it does become active. So we won't know anything on that until a little later. Right now, we just know we're postponed for this year. This just says what we're going to do going forward. March 8th, we have another development meeting, and we'll all get excited about insurance. At that time, we'll talk about fuel rates. The March 22nd is another development meeting. Mainly it's to get guidance, because the more guidance you give us on these really big items, the better our initial budget build is. And so we're going to be looking for guidance on insurance, the fuel rates, positions. If there's a definitive position that you want added in, we'll add it in. If not, it'll be out there as a requested item as we roll through the budget presentations. Let's see. And also you wanted us to take a look at an education benefit plan. We'll do that on the 22nd. We needed a little time to develop a plan for that. So the only thing, one more thing, and then I'll let you ask me your question. March 14th, we open up the budget for individuals to make entry. If we can have a definitive on the rate study, following the rate study plan, that will help facilitate things on by the 14th, okay? If we could have that before the March 22nd date.
I am not going to be here on March 22nd, and I know there was some discussion about maybe doing some of that guidance on the 15th. Did we move away from that? I mean... Yeah, it depends on everybody's schedules. We can take a look at that and see whether the 15th will work out fine. As long as it gives you enough time to, shall we say, review and determine whether you are ready to make a decision. That was part of the reason for the delay. But that's spring break, isn't it? Yeah. That's what I thought. Either that, I guess we could look at the 15th, or what's the Thursday after the 22nd? It's the 29th, right? 29. We can look at one of those two dates. Do you think the 15th will be too short a time period, and we should push it towards the end of the month, or what do you think as a group?
I thought maybe we would need a lunch where you guys could ask questions around the benefit presentation, because a 1-week turnaround is a pretty big decision on that. Yeah. So that's why we had pushed it out to the 22nd. If you guys would be comfortable with a 7-day turnaround on benefits, we can talk about it on the 15th, but that doesn't give you any time to really interact with questions as the information percolates.
I think we need more time on that.
Okay. So let's check if nobody's opposed. You don't have any other meetings on the 29th. We can see if that's
well.
open.
I'm going to be gone on the 29th.
Oh,
too.
as well. Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. What's our schedule look like here? What?
I thought I was doing good scheduling it not during our normal. Then
you're fine.
I have this one.
I don't have a calendar. Do you have one on your phone? What's the Thursday of April? The first Thursday in April? The 5th? We could check with the 5th.
The mayor's not here.
Oh.
I'm not here.
Okay. All right.
We're going to just tie you guys to a chair somewhere.
Well, does it have to be on a Thursday?
Not necessarily.
Just
let's work, let us see what we can do on the date thing. I thought you were going to need more time too. I'm with Heather because insurance is usually a lot to take in.
Depending on the date that the mayor nominates a new council person, we may want to plug that into the timetable here too.
Well, we're looking to do that on the 15th, hopefully. And so,
Yeah.
of this month, and so, in a couple of weeks. And so that would, I mean, the 22nd would give them a week of, well, that'd be their first meeting after that.
Which would be probably a little bit to digest.
I would recommend they be an audience member on that budget session of the 8th.
The biggest thing that I can think of that's going to impact budget builds when we open up it on the 14th is the rate study and the fuel rates. So if we can get guidance on that in these sessions prior to, I think we could allow, and then we could maybe delay a little bit on the insurance rates, but not by too much time. Otherwise, we won't have time to build the budgets for the presentations that will begin in April. So let me take a look at the timeline. Let's see if we can work around everybody's schedule there. Okay. Sorry. Well, it's not
You
just
messed
your
it all up, didn't you?
Are there any questions? Anything that you want to discuss more of? That's where I'm at.
Questions, council?
Well, you go ahead.
Go ahead.
You have a question. Is this the meeting where you would want us to discuss if we did want to make any big changes, like Council Member Bray just mentioned, you know, if we wanted to do some changes?
Organization structure?
Yes, we would like to begin discussion now so that by the time we're getting ready to build a budget, that we're building it according to what you're wanting us to do. So discussion should happen at this point.
Okay. Well, what was your question? And then we can discuss that.
I was just going to ask about the request for hire. We're probably not going to see any more requests as we go throughout the budget.
No, we cut them off.
We've cut that off. And
Yeah, they had a deadline because
Okay.
it is difficult. I will tell you this, when we build this salary projection, if there's movements happening between May and June, it's very easy for us to miss part of it because there's so much pieces to the puzzle that we're putting together. And so that's why we put a hard deadline saying you have to have those requests in so that we know what we're presenting on and that we can generate those numbers. So that's it'd have to be a very big exception for us to grant it. We can't let that be the normal course or we could have problems as we develop our budget.
Like an example of something big would be if you guys decide to go with a fleet model, new positions would come with that. So that would be
To go with
a fleet model.
oh,
That then we would have to create new positions, but we already have costs around those sort of things. So it's just plugging them in at that point.
So I guess can we ask our people sitting in the back what they're recommending for time frame on that, as far as how long we need before we can, or ask you that too?
On fleet?
Yeah.
Tom!
We've talked about fleet for
Yeah.
a while, but we've never
We
really
have
sat down.
we
and
have the
said-
money set aside this year. That's not enough for a system and a person, though.
Money set aside for what?
We put money towards the fleet program in the street department last year's budget, I think 150,000.
150,000.
But that's not enough to fund a computer system for citywide and a position to run fleet.
So those were capital funds?
No.
I think we put it into one of the account lines. I don't think
I don't think it's
designated
capital.
people or capital. I think it was
It's
in.
just a straight 150.
Yeah, and it was just a straight 150. I want to say it was put into professional services line.
I think that's correct.
That's what we brought
It
the
wasn't
book.
put in to fund the whole year. It was put in to be an anchor point
Yes.
from which we could develop into next year.
You're right.
Same as the economic development position.
Yes.
We didn't plan on funding an entire year. It'd be from a start point of when council said go.
And remember, if we go down, if we create a fleet operation, this is going to be an internal service fund. It's going to be a separate fund from street. It's not going to be a part of street. Street monies technically can't be used for fleet, and so we're going to have to move that operationally out of there. Now, it doesn't mean that fleet can't charge street for the services that it provides, but it can't be the payer for the whole bill, okay? And so, in my opinion, and I'll let Tom interject too, the next step in that process would be to build a model of the fund and how it's going to function, and that way we can set up for the budgeting process. And then you would make that decision. So those positions, everything connected to that would be presented at that point as a possible new endeavor. Do you have anything?
Tom Kirkman, Street Superintendent. Yeah, Joyce and I have sat down and done some preliminary estimations on budget, and we're still kind of working through some of those details on that of how that budget's going to look. But I think as far as the organizational structure and that, I think Heather and Jeff have that pretty dialed in. So that's information we get pretty quick. I think the next step that's going to be a little tricky is just coming up with that matrix of how we charge departments for the service. But that's something that Joyce and I were going to sit down within the next few weeks and try and get you guys some sort of a model of that and see if that's something that would be feasible.
That would probably be an additional budget development meeting outside the presentations, because this isn't an existing fund. This is a proposal for an additional.
When's the building going to be ready to start being used?
We're hoping by the end of summer. We're
When did you
pushing
say
for a
end of-
6-month remodel, 6 to 8 months. So that puts us there October, September.
That's only part of the building.
Correct. And that will be the administrative end of it, as well as the facilities for lunchrooms, bathrooms, locker rooms, stuff, the day-to-day stuff. The actual shop portion is pretty dialed in already for the fleet end of it. So I think we're pretty good there. Some of the changes that we're going to have to make down the road is to accommodate some of sanitation specialties as well as street specialties, like a traffic center and their wash facilities and stuff like that. But as far as the fleet thing, it's pretty turnkey once we get this remodel finished.
And what end of summer to you is different than what I was here thinking for me?
We're hoping September or October.
Okay.
We won't be in before winter because winter gets a little challenging for streets.
End of summer for me is at least by the 21st of September.
I'm with you on that,
I think it's real important for us to monitor that and have a plan. We've invested a lot in the building. The building's of no use unless we utilize it.
We're actually bringing tonight the contract to you guys for the architectural services. And then we're just going to, as soon as we get that online, we're going to get some drawings done as quick as we can, and we want to start moving as fast as we can get the paper signed.
So could we officially say that the building will be ready by our new budget year?
That is our goal.
It's a goal, I wouldn't say officially.
Well, until you have your architectural study and then your hired engineering, the people to do it, I think you'll have more definitive dates by then.
But that should be what
That's
we're
our
working
goal,
with.
exactly.
Our official goal is by then.
Yeah.
Yes. We hope to be in 19, budget year 19, in and ready to move.
And is there any anticipation that we might exercise that $150,000 before then? It might not be so good to have a building ready if we don't have personnel ready to run it.
That is correct. That's something that we'll discuss when we talk about budgeting with that. Is one of the big keys to the success of this program is going to be how well we track the repairs on the fleet, and the fleet management softwares are very expensive. They're upwards of $100,000. Right now, all of Public Works uses Lucity for an asset management program. We're trying to beta test that right now. They have a fleet management module in there. When we first were looking at it, it seemed pretty archaic, pretty crude. But we've been working with Lucity to try and see if we can add some bells and whistles to that. If we can do that, we can use an existing program that we've already got, which would lower those costs by a lot. And then we could use more of those dollars towards personnel. But we haven't really got our head wrapped around Lucity yet. We're throwing as much effort and time into it as we can to see if it's going to work out.
Is there a different package that might work better?
Pardon me?
Is there a different software program that might work better?
Yeah. It's just like anything. They've got the Cadillacs down to, and some of the really advanced software, you can get up to $150,000. It's just kind of, how good you want to go.
Is this tying in
Try once.
through IT as well, or is this?
Pardon me?
Are we tying in with IT?
Yeah, we'll have to work with IT on that
Okay.
once we dial it. Lucity's already in the system when we're using it, so right now we haven't gotten IT involved in that because it's our existing software. But we spoke to them about if we need to upgrade and move to a different one. We may have to buy our own server, or we may have the ability to use their servers. And so that's just something that as soon as we can get this Lucity thing dialed in and make sure if it's going to work or not, then that's when we're going to move to that next step.
Do you have a time frame on that?
So right now we're waiting on the program right now has a few bugs in it, and we've been in contact with Lucity about repairing those bugs. They have an upgrade right now, and we're just waiting for that upgrade to be completed. We're hoping we can get that done as soon as possible. So that's what's kind of been holding us back a little bit. At the same time, though, we're also talking with other software companies. We've been with Faster, Asset Works, and a couple others. So we've got stuff ready. If this doesn't work, we can pull the trigger on those.
What are the other cities in the area using fleet services?
So the most successful fleet department we've found in Idaho is Boise, and they're using Faster, is the name of that software. We spoke with them, and it's about an $80,000 program with about a 10% maintenance cost per year. So it'll be an ongoing of about $8,000 to $10,000. And just like most programs, they have added modules that you can go for, forecasting and modeling the way you want your fleet to look 30 years from now. And, so you can start at 80 and you go clear up to infinity probably.
He'll keep building so you
Have
can
you
spend more.
demoed any of those others?
Yes, we've demoed Faster, we've demoed Dossier. We've just spoke with Asset Works. We haven't demoed them because they are definitely the Rolls Royce. So we'll go there if we have to, but that's going to be very expensive. So we're trying the Lucity to see if we can get something good out of this, because there is some promising features there that I think will work, and that would be a very low cost, easy startup. All of our public works folks are used to it. It's an easy transition. But if it's not going to work, then we're going to move on to Plan B.
Okay, so sounds like we're going to have another presentation later, more on that. In terms of thinking of the big picture and structures and things like that, the economic person would be housed within planning, or would they be a separate?
Currently, the economic development position is structured as a standalone area. It would report directly to the mayor's office. It wouldn't be housed within planning.
It's built within, we have an economic division within the general fund.
Okay.
We have non-departmental, and then we have 0801, which is called economic development. That's where we pay for the Bannock Development Corporation, and now Ready is paid out of there. Those funds were budgeted for that person out of that department.
Okay.
But there's nothing else in that fund except for monies for a position and those other two external payments.
So do you need some direction from us on what I mean, since we don't have someone that is hired for that yet, they're not going to come and give us a budget presentation.
Well, we can present on that. But
Okay.
And probably what I would say, you have a bare bones budget now for that. You're going to have to think about travel and training, obviously, right? Some other expenses, office supplies, and so we'd have to develop that budget. I think there would have to be more money put to it in order to make it a budget that has some merit to it. Okay.
We'd have to figure out some sort of support staff too.
Yeah.
And the mayor and I have started having these discussions, what you guys want that position to function as, and we've talked about, do we need a full-time or a part-time admin? Where are they going to sit within the building? What kind of travel costs? What are you expecting? Are they doing regional? Are they doing national travel? Those are all things that we need to dial in with you before we can flush out much more on that position. Positions that are funded and are not currently being utilized are just sitting in the budget. We haven't killed those positions and we haven't moved on them, so they're just flatlined, they're not moving, still there when you do want them.
Yeah, so those dollars that were assigned for that, and also the dollars assigned for fleet, they were just put into a budget line for us to be able to track and see. They weren't built within the salary projection. Yeah, I mean, these would be the things that we would need to really do once we decide we're going to move more on this.
They were essentially placeholders so that we would
Yes.
develop that right
Yeah.
to develop.
That's right.
So you guys will bring something to us then, a
If you
time when
would-
we want to
if you
talk
would
about
like
that more.
something
That's not right now. We
More
need
flushed
to-
out on
okay.
economic development, I can do that.
Yeah, well, I think we definitely should do that.
Yeah. Oh, it is? And now like development, yes.
And then
Okay.
the other kind of big picture thing is I understand that within Public Works and Engineering, there's a need for some additional space, and we're going to be doing some remodeling of the facility. And so I have heard discussion about maybe there would be some need to expand beyond their current space. And so I think that brings up another department that we need to discuss, which is video services. I understand even before I was on the council, a lot of people had, discussed that department and had questions about it. And so I guess I would like to discuss that a little more with the council and kind of see what we think we need to do. That may be some, we may need to have then within the mayor's department, like an information public relations position in there or something. I mean, we may need to do some different things, but my hope would not be to just move everybody, but that we could maybe, I don't know, we could look at that as an...
Yeah, and if we have an idea of what you're trying to structure too, then we can develop what that would look like. So I guess that would be the guidance I'd be
It's a
looking for.
department that is increasingly losing one revenue source and being more tax funded too.
It is.
And so we have to look at the viability of that in today's world. I think Steve, before he left, was looking at some streaming options and some things like that might be available.
Okay.
And I guess the reason I'm bringing it up, I'm sure it's a disappointment for the people in that department to hear me say this, but in today's day and age where people can, on their phone, record a video and put it on YouTube, I'm not sure if this should necessarily be the city's priority to continue to, have a studio where people can come in and record. And especially since we've got all these requests in the planning department and we've got police and fire and parks people that we need, and maybe some citizens might think that those were more important positions to fund.
And my comment a while ago was how do we look at what are essential services and non-essential services? With the Northgate expansion, it's also going to require us intensified effort for Old Town and some of those places to do the counterbalancing. And the phrase, sometimes you got to make sure you have some reserve gunpowder. And I'm not sure that we're quite there. Our reserve funds are there, but I'm not sure in terms of personnel and the way we're managing that we have that reserve to do a shift. It might come if that really blew up out there.
And planning and development might need to become more of a priority. Police and fire are obvious priorities, but we might need to shift with the new development that's coming.
Well,
And we need to focus on Old Town.
and fire and police are going to be stretched just with that development out there.
Right.
And so,
Well, and
how do you
two-
stretch your essential services?
You might have needs in certain departments for a time period that's
Right.
very increased, and then it might drift back to normal.
And maybe that's where those temporary positions come in. You shift the priority for a certain amount of time, and then it shifts to something else.
Yes. Well-
I think we need to plan for that.
That's pretty difficult in departments like planning and engineering, for example, just because of the technical skill required. We do bring on positions in planning especially that are grant funded, and those are kind of limited service positions. They only exist as long as the budget allows it, as the grants come in. If you decide to go that route, to look at kind of a limited service position, that's a pretty tough recruit for us. We can do it, but it is a tough recruit. The other question I have, since we're talking about video services kind of houses two different functions. One is the video service function, and the other is the public information officer. Logan is in charge of video services, that position. Are we talking about the entirety of it, or just the video services portion?
I'm just talking about the video services portion of it. I would like to see still somebody available within the mayor's office that can do some public information outreach. And then instead of spending additional time overseeing
Moving the
video
PIO
studio, they can do a little
to
more
the mayor's office.
Yeah.
in that realm. Yeah.
And also, I agree with that, but I was also thinking the PIO position, maybe even expanding his responsibilities a little bit into more PR too, because I think PR is important for the city, and I'd like to see us do more of that. Those roles, I think, go well together.
So you're looking at elimination of video services as a function, including personnel, potentially?
Potentially.
I don't know if I think to receive some of our revenue, we have to have something there.
Yeah.
But I don't know what we have to have, and I think we need to determine that.
I think before you make the overall decision, we receive the cable franchise fees, and there might be a requirement in how we're receiving that, and I'm not sure. And so we'd have to understand that, or otherwise you're losing that funding source. And so what do we have to do to make sure we keep those dollars? Okay. And that we can check on. If we have an idea of what you're trying to structure too, then we can put together how that would look. And I think that would be the question.
We haven't really had detailed discussion on what we're at and where we might want to be in terms of our overall structure.
Okay.
And we're under kind of a modality now where we have pressure that have not been anticipated for a long time, and we've got to be adaptive to that.
Yeah.
And we have some limitations on taxes. 909,000 was as far as we could go that way, so we have to go somewhere else to find some of that mobility that we might necessitate. So I think we got to take a big picture look and see where we want to refine that picture.
Well, and when you're looking at that, one thing to always keep in mind, I think it's always been important for the city on supporting the CDBG program. That's why 2/3 of the program manager is funded out of the general fund. But those are dollars that are going for that purpose, and council has deemed that to be an important purpose. But that would be when you're talking about restructuring. That's what you're looking at. Is that still as important, or do you make that grant stay within its funding source? I know the reason why it occurred. It actually, if you look at the history of it, when they first started having the general fund a portion of that position, it was because the individual working as that program manager was also assisting with the economic development side of the city. And so that's the reason why we did the splinter. And then, of course, funding for HUD diminished, and that position didn't keep with the economic development side, but we allowed the funding to stay to assist. And it does provide a great service to our citizens. I'm not diminishing that, but it's a decision. How do you want to, which services are most important? That's what you're asking, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's something everybody has to do kind of a gut check every once in a while. And I think the city has to do that periodically. We've got the fleet thing that we're looking at. We've got the siphon connector thing. We've got the compensating balancing we're going to have to do, perhaps with the other entities in the city. So I just think it's important to take a big picture and drill down where we need to drill down. Go from there.
So to be clear, you would like us to bring forward what is required for the franchise fee and then possible org structures that could happen with or without video services personnel being eliminated or potentially rehomed to another department.
What a bare bones, what that requires for video services.
Okay. When would you like that?
Tomorrow.
I'll go ahead and put my 23 benefit plans that I'm looking that down. And I'll
It's that 1
shift
to
over.
5 thing.
When is a reasonable time for you to get that together?
I think you're going to have a full docket on the 8th. So when we do that,
And I'll be ready on the 8th.
so I think what we would do is, whatever that next meeting is going to be, we would probably push for that time period. And that would give us a little more time to put together the information.
The first meeting in March, in April would be better for me, just because I have benefits on top, and then that decision's not made on the 8th. Until we kind of pick a direction on that, that's the burning ball in my office.
Well, we're just starting the conversation.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of research
This is an
we're gonna have to
evolving
do.
budget, and we have till really August, the second meeting in August or something.
Well, not really, but okay. You have
bring
till
that.
the 13th of July, because the minute you publish, you're kind of locked in. So I would say you have up until that point, and then you're kind of you still have to
What's
hold
the
your public
detail of
hearing.
what we publish, actually, though? Don't we have some ability to still manage our budget after that?
Well, you have to amend in order to do that.
You can go
can't-
down, can you
can
not?
go
You just
down.
can't add to what we've
Yeah.
published.
Right.
But if you're looking at moving those dollars, it would be helpful to know that earlier in the process, so we could have it ready the first
Well,
part of March.
Yeah,
I mean,
you can
April.
go down, but you
We're in
can't
March.
move between funds, okay?
Yeah.
So if I'm going to levy for something, I have to have those dollars where they're going to go. I can take dollars away, but I can't say now I want the dollars to go over here versus over there.
But you're talking general fund and some of those categories you had.
Well, it's all funds. In other words, once I publish that budget, I can make the budget for each individual fund go down, but I can't move dollars from one fund to another. That would require an amendment. Okay,
An amendment of the budget that hadn't been passed yet?
that would be right, and so that means you're into October. It doesn't happen. What I'm basically saying is you're starting your year without the ability to say you're going to do that until you get into a point where you're going to actually amend it.
So we need to have kind of an idea of what we're doing before we ever publish the budget.
That's why I said, to me,
Which is
your
middle of
publication
July.
date is really your date when you want to be pretty concrete as to how everything's going to operate. We can always, we publish high because we don't have numbers, but you can only make it come down. You can't make it move around. Okay. So I'm thinking whatever we work out to be that next budget development meeting after the 8th, that's going to be the meeting that we would produce this information for you.
I was going to ask, when you said next meeting earlier, you were talking about next budget development meeting, not next study session.
No,
Okay.
I'm referring to these meetings.
And that is looking like probably right at the beginning of April, which you said is doable.
I'm thinking, and until I see what everybody's calendar's looking like.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's looking that way, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you also like fleet at that budget meeting?
Like what?
Fleet?
Fleet?
If you can.
If we could.
Well, the only thing I would say, I know that I'll be heavily involved in the fleet side. I have a financial report that's due out by the end of March, and
I'm burning the candle to get it done at this point.
So tell us what is a realistic timeframe then?
So I'll be able to know more in the next 2 weeks, but we'll push for as soon as possible. I just don't want to make a commitment and say, yes, we'll have it ready, and I don't have enough time to actually do the groundwork. So I would say in April. I don't want to commit to an exact time at this moment because I do have too many other, shall we say, fires on deck. So.
But we can get parameters that we can mold. So we just get introduction with what.
Yeah, we could do introduction, but if you're getting down into the detail of how this thing's going to operate and be funded, I've got to be involved in that part.
So you can give us some categories, and then we can put subsections of categories.
Yeah, we could give you an overview, but I think anything beyond that might be a little pressed for the first part of April.
Okay.
Anything else?
Well, Logan's sitting in the back of the room. I'm wondering, Logan, do you know what the requirements are to maintain that income from cable franchise fees?
Yep. Logan McDougall, Public Information Officer and Video Services Director. I do not. I know that the overseeing authority is the state on those. As far as what those monies can be exactly spent on, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Need to get a copy of that lead or that contract then and read through that so we know what that says.
And I'll have Ashley do some research from our side to assist with determining how we have to use those dollars. If they're like Intermountain Gas and they're like Idaho Power, they can be used in any venue, but I don't know with cable franchise fee.
I vaguely remember that we have to broadcast a certain amount.
Well,
but that doesn't determine how we produce the broadcast.
Well, let's put it this way. I don't believe that Bannock County, City of Chubbuck, they receive cable franchise fees.
They don't.
So there's something that we're having to do that entitles us to that.
Yeah.
So.
Can we sell those channels numbers to somebody?
I wouldn't count on high revenue.
No comment. No. Anyway, any other questions?
Could you go back to this sheet you passed out to us?
You bet.
Down at the bottom, you've got that facade loan trust fund. That one's scheduled to expire this year, as I understand.
What do you mean?
Fund 962. I was told by someone that those funds have a limited life.
Well, no, they're 962 and 955. These were grant funds way back when, so we received federal dollars, and pretty much the purposes that the current funds are for are what the old grant was for. And so what happened was, it's like most of these grants that seem to come through from HUD and that area, is they allow for program revenue. In other words, they grant the money, and then what we say is we give the money to an individual, and then they have to repay it with interest and the principal. And it's usually loans to people that normally can't obtain them. Okay, they have a difficult time to facilitate the infrastructure on the 955 side. So those grants have sunsetted a long time ago. These are the residual program revenues that existed within the funds. And so we kept those monies to continue the mission, so to speak, with those funds. So there's not any external restriction that says you can't spend them in any way. They're committed by the council on the basis of the way the fund was initially set up, and we haven't changed that mission. Could they be used for other purposes? That would be up to council discretion.
So we could look at those two amounts and possibly use them for something else?
Well, there was a time period when I was trying to collapse all those together and make the mission more universal so that I didn't have as many funds. Remember how I like to get rid of funds when I don't need to have lots of funds? That was one point I was thinking. It just makes it easier to manage. I believe the facade loan trust, they have one loan out there. It's a deferred loan, so we're not receiving any payments. If the property should sell, we'll receive the monies, and I'd have to look at the terms of the deferment. But there's not a lot of activity that's happening within these accounts, very little. I believe that Fund 955 was used for the water connection for the berm on Highway 30. We used those dollars a while ago. So that just gives you an idea how we've utilized it in the past.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions, Council?
So the facade, we couldn't use it on our own resources.
Well, are you thinking senior citizen center?
I'm thinking senior citizen or some of the zoo activities or some of our own buildings. The new building we acquired, can we change the frontage on it?
I am not aware of any external requirements. Basically, the fund is set up for that, for a purpose, and then we would determine how we're going to utilize those funds. If the purpose of the funds changes, then we change it.
Okay. I'm just looking for a way to exercise that. That money's not accomplishing a lot sitting there year in, year out.
These have been pretty dormant funds over the last, well, quite a few years.
I know 955 they've used is...
They used a little bit to subsidize economic development in the past, I think.
Well, they've used it as a backstop for a few major projects in the community, and so
Yes.
well, the money hasn't gone out, but it has been a backstop where they've been able to raise the money for it and stuff like that.
And Melanie's used it too to help support her with the CDBG program, so it's been a backstop for that as well.
So it's been used, but it's just not gone anywhere.
No, and like I said, there's no external restrictions. These are dead grant programs, okay? So it's just the remaining program revenue that resides there.
Did you say it was federal money, though?
I
Was it a
believe
federal grant?
It was federal grant money initially. I think CDR was created prior to us becoming an entitlement program. When we became entitlement, we moved that to Fund 81. This was the residual dollars off that old grant system.
So it could be some of the revenue that CDBG generated, and it revolved to where we manage it now. It's not got federal strings on it anymore.
Right, there's no federal strings on it.
No federal string?
No. we don't
Anytime there's
report-
federal dollars, there's federal strings somewhere. You can't say there's not. I have a hard time believing it.
I can say this, there is no reporting mechanism that we are doing in the city in regards to these dollars and how they're being used.
We probably want to follow up and make sure that that's the case, because we don't want to spend it and then all of a sudden have...
Yeah. Well, they're not reporting on the grant schedule, I can tell you this.
Why do you think I'm worried?
They're not audited as part of your A133 grants. So they are, well, and I think it's because it's not grant dollars, it's program revenue, people that have paid back on the grant. So that's why it may have initiated with federal dollars, but it did not end with federal dollars.
Sounds like $5,000 hammers. This sounds like $5,000 hammers.
Yeah, so I'll double check on it, but I don't think we have any records on it because that's how old it is. 955 has been sitting like this for a long time.
Yeah, we probably want to double check and make sure that we're not violating something.
If I remember, and this is way predates my time on the council, but I remember when there were some CDBG funds, and they would grant them to somebody, but they expected them to be paid back.
Yes.
And so
and we
once
still have
that's
those.
paid back, you've used it for its purpose, satisfy the federal government. But in getting the funds paid back, then it becomes your money to operate, much like the Housing Authority has done some of their stuff and generated a couple $1 million.
That's my understanding of both 955 and 962. It is exactly that. So once the dollars are paid back, it's no longer considered federal dollars, but other monies that come in. Because those dollars we could have granted the money away instead of creating a repayment schedule.
Are there any restrictions on what those dollars can be used for?
On which dollars?
On either one of those funds?
Well, we put restrictions based on where we've located them within the fund. The mission itself says you've committed through the budget process to spend them for this purpose.
But we could change that, right?
I believe so.
I mean, we have to check.
Yeah, well, we'll double check, but I believe what Councilman Bray spoke of was correct. So.
Find out. I have a hard time believing there's federal money without a stream.
That's a good.
I'm just.
Well, you're right about that. It's just that.
You got an airport.
Maybe an old freight.
Oh, yeah, that might be the case.
Well, the old sidewalk loan fund we had, that was the same way, and we ended up moving those funds into the general fund. You could look at it one of two ways. Most of these grants usually have some sort of matching system, external matching system, and so it could be considered city's monies at that point because of whatever the city contributed, and that's why the general fund was entitled to those dollars back. So we have done it once before.
But we could, like Jim and I noticed on some of the parade routes, we've got some major arteries where the sidewalks and curb are just in disarray. And we could dedicate some of these funds, we talked about it, with street department to get some of that corrected so that we do some beautification on these major arteries.
Yeah, and I believe that would even fall under the 955 mission.
Right. You wouldn't even have to change the mission to do that.
No.
Wouldn't accomplish a lot, but every little bit helps.
Yeah, and these are not monies that have to be, I mean, if you do work like that, they can be granted out or it could be paid back. Those are your choices.
Okay. Other questions, council?
Good stuff.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome, and
Okay.
we'll get all excited about insurance next week.
Yeah, sure we will. Sure
Heather
will.
already is.
I'm bringing a shield for in front of me and behind me.
The only thing I would say in regards to insurance is remember, we are just presenting the information. We don't control the insurance world.
Well, it's not sounding good.
You're the messenger.
It isn't
In
good.
other words?
Well, has it ever sounded good when
It's
we
not
present
good.
on insurance? I'm just saying that as a pre-lib.
Yeah. All right, then, with that, what are we doing here, Ruth? Are we adjourning this meeting? Are we...
Yes, sir. And then you can, immediately following this meeting was your council liaison working lunch.
Okay, so we will go ahead and then, thank you very much. We'll adjourn this meeting and we'll start the next meeting up in the Paradise Room with the working lunch.